The cell was a box of silence, broken only by the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Concrete walls pressed in tightly, cold and colorless, carrying the weight of finality. At the center of it sat Elena Torres, knees drawn close, eyes fixed on the tiny barred window that leaked pale light from a world she no longer belonged to. 7 days. That was all that remained before her execution. Prisoners reacted differently to death's countdown. Some broke down, screaming for mercy. Others turned violent, striking guards or hurling curses at anyone who passed. But Elena was different. She was unnervingly calm, her presence heavy, as though her silence spoke more than words ever could. Rumors swirled through the prison about her crime. A wealthy husband, a bloody betrayal, a woman who had once charmed high society and now sat waiting for the needle. To the guards, she was either a monster who deserved every second of her suffering or a tragic figure whose beauty had been wasted on bad choices. But to Elena, none of their opinions mattered. She knew only the ticking clock, the taste of regret, and the unbearable weight of secrets still unspoken. That evening, the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. A new officer had been assigned to her block, Michael Reeves. Young, sharp-featured, and known for his discipline, he was a stark contrast to the jaded men who usually guarded death row. He paused at her cell, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the prisoner sitting so still she almost blended into the shadows. "Elena Torres," he said, his voice steady but cautious. She slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes were striking, not with beauty, but with a depth that unsettled him. She studied him with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose, and for a moment he felt as if she were the one evaluating him. "You're new," she whispered. Her voice was calm, low, carrying the faintest trace of an accent that made her words linger. Michael cleared his throat. "Reeves, Officer Reeves. I'll be supervising this wing until—" He hesitated, catching himself before he finished. "Until your execution." A faint smile touched her lips, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Until the end." He shifted, uncomfortable with how easily she had said it. Most prisoners clung desperately to denial, to appeals, to fantasies of last-minute miracles. But Elena embraced the truth like an old friend. Hours passed with the usual monotony of prison life, but Michael couldn't shake the unease that lingered from that first exchange. Something about her was different, controlled, deliberate, as if she carried a story that no one else dared to hear. That night, as Elena lay on her cot, the cell seemed to close in tighter than ever. The faint scratching of rats echoed in the walls. She closed her eyes but could not silence the images. Her husband's blood, the betrayal that had shattered her, and the secrets she had never spoken aloud. Her lips moved soundlessly in the dark, whispering words to no one. 7 days. One chance. Outside, Michael stood at his post, his thoughts unsettled by her quiet presence. He reminded himself that she was just another prisoner, another name on a file destined to be closed forever. Yet something told him that her story was far from finished. And soon, against his better judgment, he would find himself drawn deeper into her silence. The next morning began like any other on death row, yet for Michael Reeves it carried an odd weight. He walked the corridor with practiced precision, keys jangling at his side, but his mind lingered on the woman in cell 9. Elena Torres sat upright when he approached, her posture almost regal despite the gray uniform draped over her thin frame. Most prisoners avoided eye contact with guards, but Elena held his gaze as though she had been waiting for him. "You didn't sleep," Michael said without thinking, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. Her lips curved faintly. "And you did?" The retort caught him off guard. For a moment, his professional mask slipped, and he felt the faintest tug of something he couldn't name. Not attraction, not sympathy, but a curiosity dangerous for a man in his position. He cleared his throat. My job isn't to talk. My job is to watch. Then watch closely, Elena murmured, leaning back against the wall. You might learn something. The words echoed in him longer than he cared to admit. Throughout the day, Michael found excuses to linger near her cell. He told himself it was procedure, vigilance, but part of him knew otherwise. Other inmates shouted obscenities, begged for favors, or cursed the system. Elena remained quiet, her silence pulling him in more than their noise ever could. By evening, he gave in to his curiosity. He stopped outside her bars, clipboard tucked under his arm. You don't act like the others, he said carefully. No fear, no desperation. Elena tilted her head, eyes sharp. Why should I? My fate is sealed. Fear only wastes what little time I have left. There was no tremor in her voice, no crack in her armor. It unsettled him. Still, Michael pressed, people usually cling to something. Hope, maybe. She laughed softly, though there was no joy in it. Hope? That's for people who believe in second chances. Do you believe in them, Officer Reeves? The way she said his name made it sound like an intimate challenge. He hesitated before replying. I believe everyone makes choices. Some can't be undone. Her smile faded, replaced by something darker. Exactly. And sometimes the truth about those choices never comes out. Sometimes the world only sees the crime, not the reason behind it. The silence that followed was heavy, stretching across the bars like a shadow. Michael realized she had given him a fragment of something, not a confession, not yet, but an opening. He checked his watch, forcing himself to step back. Time's up. Elena leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate. Then come back tomorrow. Maybe I'll tell you a story. Michael left her cell, his chest tight with unease. He told himself not to care, not to listen, but already he knew he would return. Something in her tone promised a truth he couldn't ignore, and that promise would lead him into confessions far more disturbing than he could imagine. The next night, Michael returned to the corridor with a restless unease he refused to name. His steps echoed against the concrete floor, but this time he didn't try to disguise where he was going. Cell 9. Her cell. Elena was waiting, as though she had counted the seconds until he arrived. She sat cross-legged on her cot, her hands folded neatly, eyes fixed on him with that same unshakable calm. You came back, she whispered. Michael gripped the bars, forcing himself to maintain the distance of duty. You said you had a story. She tilted her head, studying him. Not a story, a confession. The words landed heavier than he expected. He had heard confessions before, drunken inmates bragging, broken men sobbing at the end of their strength. But this was different. Her voice carried weight, like something carefully rehearsed and deliberately timed. I killed my husband, she said plainly. No one doubts that. Not the courts, not the jurors, not the papers that wrote about me. But what they don't know is why. Michael's pulse quickened. He should have shut her down, told her he wasn't her priest, wasn't her lawyer. But instead, he stayed. Go on, he said, his voice low. Elena leaned forward, her face half lit by the corridor's dim bulbs. Richard Torres, Wall Street investor, philanthropist, a man worshipped in the city. They said I was lucky to marry him. But luck has sharp teeth, Officer Reeves. Behind closed doors, Richard was not the man they saw. Her tone shifted, dark and intimate. He controlled everything. What I wore, who I saw, when I breathed. And when I dared to resist, he punished me. The bruises faded, but the humiliation never did. Michael felt a knot in his chest, though he remained silent. "He betrayed me in ways I didn't want to see," she continued. "Other women, lies about business deals, and still I stayed because leaving him meant losing everything, even my name, until the night I found him with someone I trusted, someone close." Her voice faltered just slightly, and Michael noticed her fingers tighten around the edge of her cot. "I don't expect sympathy," she said finally. "But when I picked up that knife, I wasn't just killing him. I was killing every secret, every humiliation he carved into me." The air grew heavy between them. Michael shifted his weight, the guard in him at war with the man. "That's not what the papers said," he muttered. "They said it was greed, money, his will." Elena laughed softly, bitterly. "Of course they did. Do you think men like Richard leave room for truth when they fall? His friends, his partners? They needed me painted as the villain. A woman scorned, unhinged, a monster. That was easier than admitting their golden boy was made of rot." She stood then, moving closer to the bars, her eyes catching his. "So yes, I killed him. I put the blade in his chest. But if you want to know the real crime, Officer Reeves, it's that the world only wanted half the story." Michael swallowed hard. His training told him she was manipulating him, weaving a tale designed to spark sympathy. But another part of him, the part that had stared into her eyes for too long already, wasn't so sure. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "And now you know my truth. What you do with it, that's on you." Michael stepped back, forcing air into his lungs. He wanted to dismiss her words, to file them away as the desperate ramblings of a condemned woman. But something inside him shifted, a seed of doubt rooting itself deep. As he turned to leave, Elena called softly after him. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you the rest, if you're brave enough to listen." Her voice followed him down the corridor, clinging to him like a shadow he could not shake. And for the first time, Michael realized he wanted to hear more, no matter the cost. Michael Reeves had told himself he wouldn't return to Cell 9. He had promised that Elena's confession was just another manipulative story spun by a desperate woman. Yet the next night, and the one after that, he found himself standing outside her bars again, listening to her voice as though it held answers he didn't know he was searching for. Something was changing. Their conversations no longer sounded like guard and prisoner. They lingered on small details, memories from her past, fragments of his. Michael never offered much, but Elena seemed to notice everything, the way his jaw tightened when she spoke of betrayal, the way his silence stretched when she asked about his life beyond these walls. "You don't wear your uniform like the others," she remarked one evening. "They wear it like armor. You wear it like a burden." He bristled. "You don't know me." Her smile was faint, but knowing. Not yet. The words unsettled him more than he admitted. At the officer's station, whispers had already begun. Other guards noticed how often he stopped by her cell, how long he stayed. They warned him, "Stay professional, don't get pulled in." But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that Elena was different, not because she was innocent, but because she was true. Every word carried weight, even when it cut into him. Still, he knew the risk. Lines between duty and connection blurred fast, and once crossed, they rarely reversed. That night, Elena leaned against the bars, her eyes soft in the dim light. "You think I'm dangerous?" she said. "I know you are," Michael replied firmly, though his tone lacked conviction. "Not the way they think," she whispered. "Dangerous because I see you, and maybe you see me too." The silence that followed was charged, electric in a way Michael had never felt inside these walls. For a moment, it felt as though the prison itself had faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in something forbidden. Michael forced himself to step back, breaking the spell. Whatever this is, it can't happen. You're here. I'm out there. We keep it that way. Elena's voice dropped, almost tender. I don't want forever. I just want one thing before I go. Her words lingered, cryptic and heavy. Michael frowned, unsettled. What does that mean? She didn't answer, only turned away and sat back on her cot, her silence deliberate. For the first time since he met her, Michael felt as though she had ended the conversation, not him. That night, as he lay awake, her words replayed endlessly. One thing before I go. The seed of connection had grown roots, and Michael knew he was already caught. And soon, Elena would reveal what that one thing truly was, a last wish that would shatter everything he thought he understood about her. The prison was quieter than usual that night, its silence heavy and unnatural. Michael Reeves walked the corridor with unease gnawing at him. He knew where his steps were leading, cell 9. And he hated how little resistance he offered to the pull. Elena was sitting upright, her dark hair falling loosely over her shoulders, her face unreadable. When she saw him, her lips curved into that faint smile that unsettled him more than any scream could. You came, she whispered. Michael kept his tone guarded. You said you wanted something before you go. I'm here to listen, nothing more. She tilted her head, studying him with eyes too sharp to belong to someone resigned to death. Listening is already more than most would give me. He gripped the bars tighter, forcing distance. Then say it. What's your last wish? For a long moment she said nothing, only shifted forward until her face hovered inches from the cold metal between them. Her voice dropped, low and deliberate. I want you to grant me one night outside these walls. Michael stiffened, almost laughing at the impossibility. You're joking. Her expression didn't change. I've spent years in this box. 7 days left, and then I disappear forever. I don't want freedom, Reeves. I don't want to run. I want one night in the world, to feel the air, to see the city lights, to be human again before I die. He shook his head instantly. That's not a wish. That's an escape plan. Her eyes narrowed. If I wanted to escape, I'd ask for a weapon, or for you to leave my cell door open. This isn't about running. I won't even fight when the time comes, but you asked what I want, and that is my truth. One night where I am not a prisoner, just Elena. Michael's breath caught. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity, to call her manipulative, delusional. Yet something about her voice, the raw ache woven into her words, dug beneath his armor. He forced a bitter edge. You know that's impossible. I'd lose my badge, my career, everything. And I will lose my life, she whispered back, her voice trembling now, the first crack he had ever heard in her composure. You still have choices. I don't. Don't you see the difference? The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. Michael tried to steady himself, but Elena's eyes pinned him, demanding not pity but recognition. Finally, she leaned back against the wall, her tone softer. It doesn't have to be far. Just a drive, a park bench, a glimpse of the skyline. I want to remember who I was before Richard destroyed me, before the newspapers branded me a monster. That's all I ask. Michael swallowed hard. Her words had twisted something inside him, igniting guilt he couldn't explain. He wanted to believe she was manipulating him, that this was just another ploy. But deep down, he knew she was asking not for escape, but for dignity. He stepped back, shaking his head as if distance could untangle the grip she had over him. I can't promise anything. Do you understand that? Her eyes softened. I don't need a promise. Just think about it. Think about whether a condemned woman deserves one moment of grace. Michael turned away, the echo of her words following him down the corridor like a shadow. His colleagues would call him a fool for even listening. His superiors would end his career if they suspected his hesitation. Yet as he walked back to the officer's station, her plea gnawed at him, burrowing deeper with every step. By the time dawn crept through the barred windows, Michael Reeves knew something had shifted. He was no longer just her guard. He was a man carrying a burden he didn't ask for, a request that would not leave him in peace. And soon, his search for clarity would lead him to something even more dangerous: the secret Jew. Ornel Elena had hidden within her cell. Michael Reeves tried to convince himself that Elena's request was madness, that no sane officer would even entertain the thought. Yet as he sat in the staff lounge, staring at the steam rising from his untouched coffee, her voice replayed in his head. One night outside these walls, one chance to be human. It was the crack in her composure that haunted him most. The tremor he had caught in her voice, the raw desperation hidden beneath her calm surface. He told himself it was manipulation, a performance from a woman who knew how to bend men to her will. But another part of him whispered it was real. The next evening, he lingered near her cell again, hoping to read her more closely, to catch some sign of deceit. Elena sat on her cot, scribbling on something in her lap. When she noticed him, she quickly slid the object beneath her pillow. Michael frowned. "What was that?" "Nothing," she said smoothly. "A way to pass the hours." But his instincts stirred. He had worked long enough in the prison system to recognize the guarded look of someone hiding contraband. When she turned her back, he unlocked the door with careful precision, stepping inside for the first time. Elena rose instantly, her body taut with tension. "What are you doing?" "Routine check," he lied, though his voice carried little authority. His eyes scanned the tiny room. Beneath the pillow he found it, a leather-bound notebook, its edges worn, pages thick with ink. He lifted it slowly, feeling the weight of it in his hands. "Give that back," Elena snapped, her voice breaking with sudden urgency. Michael ignored her and flipped the journal open. Inside were not simple ramblings, but carefully written pages, filled with dates, names, fragments of letters. Some were written in hurried scrawl, others in meticulous handwriting that spoke of sleepless nights. "You weren't supposed to see that," she speared. He looked up at her. "What is this?" Elena's face softened, resignation replacing her anger. "It's my truth. Everything they never wanted to hear in court. My life with Richard, the betrayals, the nights he broke me down until I thought I was nothing. Every detail is there. Every lie they covered up." Michael flipped through more pages, his eyes catching on phrases that sent shivers down his spine. Payments to silence her. Photographs hidden in the safe. The partner who knew everything. The journal was more than memory. It was evidence, raw and unfiltered, pointing to a network of corruption surrounding her husband's empire. He closed the book slowly, his heart pounding. Why hide this? Why not give it to your lawyer? Elena laughed bitterly. Do you really think they would have cared? Men like Richard had friends in every corner of the system. I gave pieces of it once, and it vanished before trial. I kept the rest hidden, waiting for someone who might actually see me, not the monster they wanted me to be. Her eyes bore into him with unsettling intensity, and now you've seen it. Tell me, Officer Reeves, do you believe me? Michael stood frozen, the journal heavy in his hands. He wanted to dismiss it, to claim it was another trick. But the names, the details, they were too precise to ignore. He could feel the line blurring beneath his feet, the edge of duty crumbling under the weight of her truth. Finally, he placed the journal back on the cot, his voice rough. I don't know what to believe. Elena smiled faintly, though it carried no triumph. That's more than most have ever given me. Michael left the cell, the echo of her words and the weight of the journal following him down the corridor. For the first time, he realized her last wish wasn't the only dangerous request pressing on him. Now, he carried a truth that could destroy them both. And the choice of what to do next was tearing him apart. Michael Reeves lay awake long after his shift, the ceiling above him a canvas for the storm inside his mind. Elena's journal haunted him. The ink-stained pages had revealed more than her memories. They hinted at rot in places he had once trusted. The corruption she described, the silencing of evidence, the names she dared to write down, all of it gnawed at his conscience. But so did the risk. If he reported the journal, it would vanish into the system like she claimed, shredded and buried before it reached daylight. If he kept it hidden, he was no longer an officer upholding the law, but an accomplice to a convicted murderer. For the first time in years, Michael questioned which role weighed heavier, the enforcer of order or the guardian of truth. The following evening he avoided Elena's cell, hoping distance might dull the pull she had on him. Yet his steps betrayed him, carrying him back to her door. She was waiting, calm as ever, her eyes glinting with a quiet knowledge. "You read it all, didn't you?" she asked softly. Michael didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Elena leaned closer, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You know I'm not lying. You felt it in those pages. My husband wasn't just a monster behind closed doors. He had allies who made sure his sins disappeared. That's why I never stood a chance." Michael clenched his jaw. "You're asking me to believe your truth over the justice system I've sworn to serve?" "I'm asking you to see what's in front of you," she countered. "You've spent years guarding criminals, Michael. Haven't you ever wondered how many of them are here because someone more powerful wanted them silenced?" Her words struck deeper than he wanted to admit. He had seen men locked away for petty crimes, their sentences stretched while others with influence walked free. He had ignored the pattern, convincing himself. It wasn't his battle, but Elena's journal turned those doubts into sharp-edged reality. "Even if I believe you," he muttered, "what do you expect me to do?" Elena's gaze didn't waver. "Protect the truth. That journal is bigger than me, bigger than you. Don't let it vanish like everything else." Michael's chest tightened. She wasn't asking for escape this time. She was asking for his integrity, his career, his life as he knew it. If he guarded the journal, he risked exposure. If he surrendered it, he betrayed the only shred of honesty she had offered. As the prison lights dimmed, signaling lockdown, Michael lingered in the corridor. His reflection in the glass door looked unfamiliar. A man torn between the rules he lived by and the justice he once believed in. For the first time, he realized that choosing either path would destroy something inside him. The journal burned in his memory, and so did Elena's eyes, watching him as if she already knew which decision he would make. But Michael didn't know. Not yet. All he knew was that the weight of his choice was pressing harder with every breath, and soon, one way or another, it would break him. The journal never left Michael's thoughts. Even when he locked it inside his desk drawer, its weight clung to him like a hidden weapon. Every line Elena had written seemed to echo louder with each passing hour. Names of judges, officers, and prosecutors who had turned their eyes away from her husband's brutality. Men he had respected, men still walking free. Michael knew keeping the journal was a crime against his oath, yet turning it in would erase it forever. He was trapped in a tightening circle, one he could neither step out of nor endure. 2 nights later, unable to resist, he returned to Elena's cell. She was awake, perched on her bunk, her hair loose around her face. She looked less like a prisoner and more like a prophet of her own tragedy, waiting for him. "You came back," she said simply. Michael didn't deny it. He slid closer to the bars, his voice low. "If what you wrote is true, you've named men who could destroy both of us. Why tell me?" Her lips curved into something between sorrow and defiance. "Because you're not like them. You see me. You actually read my words instead of dismissing me as a monster. And maybe, because I don't have much time left, I need someone who can carry the truth after I'm gone. The vulnerability in her tone made Michael's chest ache. Against all reason, he asked, "Why me?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because you still believe in justice, even if you don't admit it anymore." The silence that followed was thick, charged with something dangerous. The walls around them seemed to lean in, pressing their breaths closer together. Forbidden. That's what it was. A guard and a prisoner, bound not by duty, but by an unraveling secret that could consume them both. Michael fought the urge to step back, to sever the connection before it grew stronger, but instead he asked, "If I keep this journal safe, if I risk everything, what happens then?" Elena leaned forward, her voice almost a whisper. "Then maybe, after I'm gone, someone will finally see me not as a murderer, but as a woman who fought against the men who destroyed her life." Her words crawled beneath his skin, rooting deep. He should have warned her, reminded her of boundaries, reported the entire exchange, yet he didn't. He found himself whispering back, "You're asking me to gamble with everything I have." Her hand reached through the bars, trembling, almost brushing his. "And I'm gambling with the only thing I have left, trusting you." The touch never fully connected, but the closeness itself was an unspoken confession. Michael stepped back at last, heart hammering, knowing that line had been blurred. The truth he held was no longer just hers. It was his burden, too. And with every stolen word, every forbidden glance, Michael knew the line between officer and prisoner was unraveling. A line that could not hold forever. Michael told himself he wouldn't go back. He promised he'd keep his distance, bury the journal in silence, and shut down the dangerous spark forming between him and Elena. But promises meant little in the suffocating air of the prison, where every glance and every word carried weight far heavier than duty. 3 nights after their last conversation, he found himself once again standing outside her cell. The corridor was silent, the hum of the lights above the only witness. Inside, Elena sat waiting, as if she had known he would come. "You shouldn't be here," Michael muttered, his voice rough with restraint. Her reply was soft but sharp as glass. "And yet you are." The words left no space for denial. He unlocked the inspection slot and slipped the journal through, letting her hold it one last time. Her hands shook as she touched it, tracing the leather cover like it was a living thing. "I thought I'd never see this again," she whispered. Michael leaned closer. "This is dangerous. If anyone finds out I've kept this from evidence, I'll lose everything. My badge, my life as I know it." Elena's eyes brimmed with something deeper than gratitude, something he wasn't supposed to see. "Then why did you bring it back to me?" The question cracked something inside him. He had no answer that sounded like reason. Only truth. "Because I believe you." The silence that followed was not empty. It pulsed with a forbidden electricity. Elena stepped forward, her fingers brushing against his through the bars. The contact was fleeting but powerful, a spark that ignited everything they had been holding back. Michael should have pulled away. He should have reminded himself she was a prisoner, convicted of murder, and he was sworn to keep order. But instead, he stayed. The act was not one of words, but of surrender. In that dim corridor, boundaries collapsed. The journal between tied. Hem became a bridge, her trust binding itself to his fear. When her hand lingered in his, Michael realized he had crossed a line he could never uncross. Elena's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Do you know what this means, Michael? You've chosen me, not them, not the system." His pulse thundered in his ears. I don't know what I've chosen. All I know is I can't let them erase you. For the first time since her imprisonment, Elena's face softened into something almost unrecognizable. Hope. It was fragile, dangerous, and utterly consuming. But as Michael pulled back, locking the slot and pocketing the keys, dread settled in his chest. This wasn't just compassion anymore. It wasn't just duty twisted by circumstance. It was a betrayal of his oath, of the system, and maybe even of himself. And betrayal never came without consequence. The day arrived with a heaviness that hung over the prison like a storm no one dared name. Michael woke before dawn, his chest tight, the sound of his alarm clock replaced by the echo of Elena's voice in his mind. You've chosen me, not them. But had he? The prison was alive with hushed tension, officers moving briskly, their faces carved into grim lines. Death had a way of reshaping the air, making every footstep heavier, every door louder. Today, Elena Vasquez would die by lethal injection. Michael tried to steady himself as he walked the sterile corridors. He wasn't part of the official detail assigned to the execution chamber, but he couldn't stay away, not after everything, not after the act. He found her waiting in the holding cell, the final stop before the chamber. She wore a plain gray uniform, her wrists cuffed loosely in front of her. There was no defiance in her eyes now, only a calm resignation that unsettled him more than any anger could have. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. So, you came. His throat tightened. I had to. The guards around them gave him a look, but said nothing. They had all learned that Elena had a way of bending people without force, and Michael was no exception. She stepped closer, the chains rattling softly. Do you have it? Michael hesitated, then slipped a folded page from the journal into her hands, careful to shield the gesture from the others. Her fingers clutched the paper as though it were air itself. Thank you, she whispered. Now, even if I go, my truth doesn't die. Michael swallowed hard. Elena, I don't know if I've saved you or destroyed myself. Her gaze held his, unwavering. Maybe both, but you listened. That's more than anyone else ever did. The door to the execution chamber opened with a metallic groan, cutting through their moment like a blade. Time seemed to shrink. The warden's voice, Cal's, led her name, and 2 guards moved to escort her inside. Michael's pulse thundered. Every fiber of his being screamed to intervene, to tear the restraints away, to stop what was about to happen. But he stood frozen, bound by the uniform on his back and the war in his heart. Elena walked with a strange dignity, clutching the folded page against her chest as if it were armor. Just before she disappeared through the door, she turned her head and gave him one last look. Not of fear, not of anger, but of quiet gratitude. The door shut, and Michael felt as though it had sealed a coffin around him, too. Moments later, the intercom crackled with the announcement. The execution had been carried out. Michael didn't move. He couldn't. For in that instant he realized the line he had crossed was not one he could ever return from. The system had killed her, but it had also killed something inside him, and that death would follow him forever. The prison returned to routine within hours of Elena's death, as if nothing remarkable had happened. The corridors buzzed with the same clipped orders, the same metallic slams of doors, the same artificial rhythm of control. But for Michael Reeves, nothing was the same. Her execution replayed endlessly in his mind. The quiet dignity in her walk, the folded page pressed against her chest, the look in her eyes before the door closed forever. That image stalked him through every shift, clinging to him even in sleep. He had witnessed death before, but this was different. He had let the system claim her, even as he carried the truth she trusted him to protect. At his desk, the journal remained hidden, its leather cover worn smooth from his hands. He told himself he should destroy it, rid himself of the danger. But whenever he opened the drawer, his fingers refused to let go. The words inside had bound themselves to his conscience like chains. The other officers joked at the break table, their voices careless. "Another one gone," one said. "Cleaner than the electric chair at least." Michael forced a laugh he didn't feel, retreating into silence. To speak would be to betray himself. He was no longer one of them. He was something in between, a man still in uniform but already living outside its code. Nights were worse. Alone in his apartment, Michael would pour a glass of whiskey and read Elena's words again, as though her ghost demanded his company. Each sentence felt heavier now, each name she had written like a wound waiting to bleed. She had trusted him to guard her truth, and now that trust cut deeper than any reprimand ever could. One night, unable to contain the weight any longer, he whispered into the empty room, "I chose you, Elena, but I don't know what it cost." The silence that followed was unbearable. Rumors began to circulate. A fellow officer mentioned, Ed casually, that Internal Affairs was sniffing around, asking why Michael had spent so much time near Elena's cell before the execution. His pulse spiked, but he masked it with indifference. Still, the walls around him tightened. Someone knew, or soon would. The thought of exposure terrified him, yet part of him longed for it. The chance to finally speak the truth aloud, to free himself from the crushing weight of secrecy. But he knew what would happen if he did. The system didn't protect men like him. It buried them. As the days bled into weeks, Michael felt the edges of himself fraying. Elena was gone, but her presence lingered in every shadow, every decision, every breath he took. And though he still wore the badge, he no longer felt like an officer. He felt like a man condemned, carrying a secret that could destroy everything, or finally set it free. Weeks passed, but Michael Reeves felt as though time itself had stopped the moment Elena Vasquez drew her last breath. The prison moved on. New inmates arrived, old cases closed, routines fell back into place. Yet inside him, something had ruptured beyond repair. The journal remained hidden in his apartment, tucked beneath the floorboard under his bed. He could hear it there sometimes, whispering like a pulse under the silence. Every night he debated whether to destroy it, to burn away the danger before it consumed him. But each time, Elena's voice echoed in his memory. "Now, even if I go, my truth doesn't die." Her truth lived on, but so did the shock. The shock of her calm walk to death, the shock of her trust in him, a trust he had not fully honored, and the shock of his own betrayal, of the badge he once wore with pride, of the system he once defended without question. The officers around him carried on unaffected. Some mocked her, others dismissed her execution as routine. Michael said nothing, but inside he seethed. Every careless remark was a blade, reminding him of the divide between their blind obedience and the burden he carried. Nights were the hardest. Whiskey dulled the edges, but never erased them. He saw her eyes before sleep, that look of gratitude mixed with finality, and he woke drenched in sweat, haunted by the knowledge that he had let her die. He had crossed the line for her, but not far enough to save her. One evening, he stood before his bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection until it blurred. The man looking back was not the officer he once recognized. He was someone hollow, fractured, a ghost wearing a uniform. The journal's presence pressed on him like a living thing. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was a verdict. To reveal it meant war with the system. To hide it meant letting Elena vanish, her truth buried like the others before her. The choice weighed heavier with each passing day, yet he remained paralyzed. Fear gripped one arm, guilt the other, and both dragged him deeper into the abyss. In rare moments of quiet, Michael wondered what Elena would think of him now. Would she see him as her savior for guarding her words, or as a coward for not daring to release them into the world? The question gnawed at him, unanswerable, leaving him stranded between redemption and ruin. The shock did not fade. It calcified, becoming part of him, an invisible scar etched into his bones. And as the city outside thrummed with life, Michael sat alone in his darkened apartment, the journal waiting beneath him, silent but unrelenting. The truth was still there. The choice was still his. But the shock of what he had done, and what he had failed to do, would remain long after everything else was gone.